There we go. So we're definitely recording. Oh yeah, I have 1 o'clock, so Rich and Maria, if it's okay with you all, go ahead and get us underway here. People are trickling in. Welcome everyone who's attending. I'm Joe Sullivan with the GSC office, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. If this is your first time attending one of our events, then welcome and thank you for being here. Today's travelogue will take us to Brooklyn, New York, an urban metropolis with a long and storied history. Our presenters are Rich Stein and Maria Diecidue. Rich and Maria have presented before, and you can find their travelogues along with others on our website and YouTube page. Now it's time to enjoy this off the beaten track visit to Brooklyn with Rich and Maria. Before we get underway, to our attendees, if any of you guys have any questions, just pop them in the Q&A function at the bottom, and we will get them answered at the end of the presentation. Rich and Maria, thank you again for being here, and feel free to take it away.
Hello, I'm Maria Diecidue, and Rich Stein is my partner. You may know us from our previous travelogues on Amsterdam and the South Island of New Zealand. Many of the GSC travelogues take us to exotic locales, far-flung places around the globe. But today's subject is a little closer to home, but still extraordinary. Some might even say exotic. Join us on this journey through Brooklyn, a dynamic, multicultural American city. Rich and I were both born in New York City, and as we take you through this presentation, we will share some personal recollections. Returning to do our research on this urban metropolis, we fell in love in Brooklyn.
When people think of New York, Manhattan usually comes to mind. Well, today, we're going to take you off the beaten path to Brooklyn, where its location, geography, history, neighborhoods, and people made Brooklyn destined for fame and fortune and make Brooklyn so special and worth visiting. So, where is it? Well, Brooklyn can be geographically referenced in many ways. It's downstate New York, it's on the west end of Long Island, and it's across the river from Manhattan. Brooklyn is one of the 5 boroughs of New York City. It's also known as Kings County. And there are many ways to get there, but let's start with the best.
The Brooklyn Bridge. It's magnificent. It's defined by its dramatic neo-Gothic arches, and it was an engineering marvel of its time. It's an enduring icon of the city, and when the Brooklyn Bridge opened in 1883, it was the first fixed crossing of the East River and was also the longest suspension bridge in the world. We've driven and walked across the bridge. In the early days, trolleys crossed the bridge too. In those days, people had few cars. There's a pedestrian walkway between the arches and above the vehicular traffic. I highly recommend the walk. A walk across the bridge offers breathtaking views of the city. This aerial view shows downtown Brooklyn in the center background with 3 bridges crossing the East River, connecting Brooklyn and Manhattan. Also visible is the Navy Yard, Prospect Park, and Greenwood Cemetery. North of the Brooklyn Bridge are the Manhattan and Williamsburg bridges, providing additional connections between Manhattan and Brooklyn.
And on the Brooklyn side of the bridge, Old Fulton Street was the terminal for Robert Fulton's ferry service. The ferry docked at another Fulton Street on the Manhattan side. One other bridge, the Verrazano, was completed in 1964, connecting Brooklyn to Staten Island, and we'll reference this bridge later in the presentation.
When you reach the Brooklyn side of the Brooklyn Bridge, you'll be down in downtown Brooklyn. It's a government center and a busy commercial area. There you'll find Borough Hall. It's the oldest public building in Brooklyn, built in 1848, and it was originally built as Brooklyn's City Hall when Brooklyn was an independent city. Today, it houses offices for the borough president and administrative services. Borough Hall fronts a lovely plaza that's open for public activities. On the day we visited, there was a farmer's market, food trucks, and people enjoying a lovely day outdoors. Next to Borough Hall is the Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg Municipal Building. RBG, born in Brooklyn, is one of many famous Brooklynites.
Near Borough Hall, we came upon this statue of Henry Ward Beecher. We learned that he was a clergyman and a speaker known for his support of the abolition of slavery. His sister, Harriet Beecher Stowe, is the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin. But from here, it's a short quarter-mile walk to the New York Transit Museum. Now, if you're going to go visit a museum about the subway, what better way to enter it than through a subway entrance? The museum is in a decommissioned subway station. Here on the mezzanine level, there are exhibits such as this one of old turnstiles where you had to actually put a token in. And there's also vintage signs. And down on the platform level, there are a number of historic rail cars and then old maps and vintage advertisements. Of course, there are other ways to get around in Brooklyn, even though there is an extensive street grid. Cars are maybe not the best way. Most big cities, traffic can be a grind and parking can be non-existent. You could ask this guy for directions. He's been taking the subway since he was 12. Or you could just consult the map. And it may seem overwhelming at first, but there is a method to this madness. This map features the Brooklyn portion of the subway. There are 170 stations in Brooklyn, and it's a round-the-clock operation. But the subway is not the only way to get around. There are highways. During the 1950s and 60s, there was a nationwide effort to build interstate highways. Robert Moses, an urban planner and chairman of the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, had an idea for a Brooklyn-Queens expressway. He hoped to build a highway from Jersey across Staten Island over the Verrazano Bridge and then through Brooklyn and on into Queens. Brooklyn Heights residents were up in arms, Brooklyn Heights, at this plan to build a highway through their historic neighborhood and demanded an alternate route. There had to be a better way.
Brooklyn Heights Historic District was under threat by Moses' idea to build the BQE through this beautiful neighborhood. The community successfully fought and won for an alternative route. The west side of Brooklyn Heights neighborhood is set along the side of a terminal moraine. Well, what's a terminal moraine, you might ask, and why is it called the Heights?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me take you back in time to the Laurentide Ice Age, some 20,000 years ago. A ridge of rubble deposited by an ice glacier shaped the development of New York City. This ridge, called a terminal moraine, is visible today throughout Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. It's why neighborhoods have names containing heights, ridge, slope, hills, etc. Another factor of note is that when portions of that ice sheet melted, it created a massive wave which came down the Hudson River and scoured out what is now known as New York Harbor. So I'm a bit of a map geek, and this digital elevation image clearly displays where the high points are, illustrated in orange and red. And there is another smaller area right here in the Brooklyn Heights vicinity. This red line shows the route preferred by Moses, which would have run through the Heights and through the heart of downtown Brooklyn. Residents fought and won the battle to preserve their historic Brooklyn Heights community, and the solution was this western orientation, which we see here as the current Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. This is a triple-layer highway built on the edge of the moraine. At the bottom, you got local Furman Street. You have then the southbound lanes. The northbound lanes are on top of it. And at the very top is this cantilevered pedestrian promenade.
Here's a view of Lower Manhattan from the promenade. Robert Fulton's steam ferry service that began in 1814 led to Brooklyn Heights emerging as the first suburb of New York City. The promenade is lined with elegant row houses that overlook the East River. This area consistently represented prime real estate. Early residents included prominent business figures such as Henry Pierpont. He played a pivotal role in local land development and invested in Robert Fulton's Ferry Company to improve access to Brooklyn and attract affluent investors. J.A. Roebling, the civil engineer who designed and built the Brooklyn Bridge, lived there and watched the bridge being built. But let's go back in time to Brooklyn before the ferries and the bridges. Of course, there were First Nation inhabitants in Brooklyn. For 3,000 years, the Lenape farmed and hunted and traded before the Europeans arrived. Then, in 1624, the Dutch established New Amsterdam, and Flatbush became a farming area. By the way, Broekkolon means broken land in Dutch, from what we learned in Rich's geography lesson, broken land is an apt description for Brooklyn. The Dutch West India Company brought enslaved Africans to the region. They worked on the farms, and in 1664, the British conquered New Netherlands, and New Amsterdam became New York. Under British rule, Brooklyn became identified as Kings County. Dutch settlers continued to farm for 250 years. So, on one of our trips, we headed to Flatbush to find an early example of Dutch influence. The Wyckoff House is the oldest house in all of New York State, and it was the first New York State landmark. In 1652, Peter Wyckoff's family moved in and farmed a large area of Flatbush. Today, the house is surrounded by a acre and a half park that offers a glimpse of Dutch colonial American farm life. The Wyckoff House farm, at the Wyckoff House farm, and the students learn about history and the site through inquiry and exploration.
The house and the farm are surrounded by light industry and a working class neighborhood. You can barely make out the farmhouse on the back of this photograph. By the 1800s, with the onset of ferry service and bridges, people were living and working in Brooklyn, creating a population boom.
And as the population grows, a place for the living is there, but what about the dead? As the population of Manhattan and Brooklyn grew, churchyards and urban neighborhoods were overcrowded, and the spread of diseases like cholera were a serious concern. The need for burial places in more rural settings became necessary. Henry Pierpont, who we met in Brooklyn Heights, insisted that a large tract of land on the Gowanus Hills be set aside for a rural cemetery. And in 1838, New York State legislature incorporated Greenwood Cemetery, not too soon, because by the 1900s, the population had grown to over 1 million. So on the Gowanus Hills, Greenwood Cemetery was established. And since 1838, it has served as a natural park for the living and a resting place for the dearly departed. Beautifully landscaped, the cemetery offers public tours and events, and Greenwood played an important role in American history. Greenwood is the permanent resting place of about 600,000 souls, including some rich and famous: Leonard Bernstein, the artist Basquiat, Henry Pierpont, Louis Comfort Tiffany, Nathaniel Courier of Courier and Ives, and Charles Ebbets, just to name a few. But Greenwood had a major role in the Revolutionary War.
The highest point in Brooklyn, at 216 feet, is in Greenwood Cemetery, and this was the site of the Battle of Brooklyn, where America's path to independence began in August of '76. It was the first military engagement following the Declaration of Independence on July 4th of that year. On Battle Hill, there are monuments commemorating the American Revolution and the Battle of Brooklyn. There's also a monument to Civil War soldiers here too. And by the way, we lost the Battle of Brooklyn, but went on to win the war.
From this hilltop is a spectacular view of New York Harbor. And while modernity is encroaching everywhere, there's a movement to protect this view of the New York Harbor from Battle Hill. From the Dutch settlements to the British conquest of the New Netherlands and until 1898, Brooklyn was a city in its own right. Here's an early map showing how Brooklyn was originally made up of 6 separate towns. The 6 towns were subdivided into numerous neighborhoods still recognizable today, like Bushwick and Flatbush. But if Brooklyn was a separate city today, it would be the 4th largest in the United States at 2.6 million. In 1664, the English conquered the New Netherlands and the British rule began. New Amsterdam became New York. The 6 towns were united into Kings County, and on January 1st of 1898, after a long political campaign and public relations battle, Brooklyn was consolidated and annexed along with other areas to form the 5-borough structure we know today as New York City. But even before 1900, when the population reached 1 million, water from underground wells was insufficient. A growing city needs water.
So when Maria and I grew up, we lived a few blocks from Conduit Boulevard. That was a major arterial street linking Queens and Brooklyn. And I'm sure back then I had some understanding of what a conduit was, like a pipe or structure that transports some material. So Conduit Boulevard transported cars. But it wasn't until I started researching Brooklyn that I found out its origins. In 1852, the city of Brooklyn acquired Paisley Pond Park, as a source for its new water system. By that year, water from the pond was being transported 6 miles along the Ridgewood Aqueduct up to the Ridgewood Reservoir. The Ridgewood Reservoir just happened to be at the top of the moraine. From there, it was distributed to Brooklyn neighborhoods, but as the city grew, the water system was expanded to include additional bodies of water further out on Long Island. And in fact, there's a nearby street in Brooklyn here named Force Tube Avenue, where the water was pumped from the aqueduct up to the reservoir. Here's a map of the retaining ponds that made up the reservoir. And even though the reservoir became obsolete about 40 years after it was initiated, Brooklyn was merged into the greater New York City, which gave Brooklyn access to the extensive Croton water supply systems. The reservoir became a mere backup in 1959 and finally decommissioned in 1989. The 3 basins were left unattended, but as the decades passed, they turned into forests and wetlands. The Ridgewood Reservoir has been placed on the National Register of Historic Places. Here's what it looks like today. It's part of Highland Park on the border of Brooklyn and Queens and is a thriving natural wetland. It's a lovely wooded area and a great place to visit. By the way, I want to show you this map. This is from an app called Map My Ride. You can also walk your walk to capture the extent of our walks, and we did this a number of our visits. The result is displayed as a red line showing our route.
On this adventure, our next adventure to Flatbush, we began in Flatbush, but why? It's the birthplace of Neil Diamond, Barbra Streisand, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But mostly we went because it's the home of Ebbets Field and the Brooklyn Dodgers. And if you're a baseball fan, you can't go to Brooklyn and not pay homage to Ebbets, the home of the Brooklyn Dodgers from 1913 to 1957.
Here it is, or rather, here it was. This is Ebbets Field as it looked on probably an opening day, constructed back in 1912 on the corner of Bedford Avenue and Sullivan Place by Charles Ebbets. The stadium was home to the Dodgers for 45 years until the team moved to LA in 1957. Now, the stadium is famous for hosting Jackie Robinson's debut in 1947, which broke the Major League Baseball color barrier. Stadium was torn down in 1960 and replaced by this high-rise public housing building. The site is now occupied it's called Ebbets Field Houses. All that's left is a cornerstone in the front door of that building here. This guy will show you where it's at. But here's some trivia. Why is the team called the Dodgers? Well, long before cars were prevalent, trolleys were the way to get around. Trolleys ran on rails and couldn't move out of the way of pedestrians. It was up to the pedestrians to move or dodge the trolleys. The team became known as the Brooklyn Trolley Dodgers.
So from that Ebbets Field marker, we entered the Prospect Park through the Botanic Gardens. Prospect Park was completed in 1873, providing another rural setting for crowded city dwellers. Prospect Park was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux, who designed the Central Park in Manhattan and Jackson Park in Chicago. We continued through the park until we came upon a marker between the old town of Brooklyn and the village of Flatbush that was established in 1651. The towns of Brooklyn and Flatbush consolidated into the independent city of Brooklyn and eventually into the five-borough city of New York by 1898. So our visit to the Botanic Gardens ended at Eastern Parkway. This is where the Brooklyn Museum and the central branch of the Brooklyn Public Library are. In the summer of 2023, the library celebrated rap star Jay-Z's, another Brooklyn native, and Beyonce's husband, by the way, with the exhibit of the touchstone from his sprawling career. Jay-Z helped with library card signups. This resulted in 14,000 patrons signing up for their first library cards. At the main entrance of Prospect Park is Grand Army Plaza. The Soldiers and Sailors Arch graces the plaza and was completed in 1892, and the arch commemorates the American Civil War veterans. Here's a bird's eye view of the library. Now, there's a variety of food trucks in Brooklyn, but it's not every day you come across a halal truck. Grand Army Plaza is also where the Eastern Parkway ends and Prospect Park West begins, bringing us to Park Slope. The slope is named for the area's prominent topographical feature, the way the land gradually slopes down from Prospect Park to the lower elevation of the Gowanus Canal. It's one of the most desirable neighborhoods in Brooklyn, and in addition to the beautiful brownstone houses, there are popular restaurants and bars on 5th and 7th Avenues. After the completion of Prospect Park, houses for the more affluent were developed in Park Slope. This magnificent house is the Adams House Mansion. It's now privately owned. Adams was the inventor of chiclets gum and gum dispensers. Here in Chicago, we have Wrigley, our very own chewing gum billionaire. Leaving Park Slope, we walked along Carroll Street towards the Gowanus Canal to find the Old Stone House. Gowanus and Carroll Gardens are two distinctly different neighborhoods on each side of the canal. On the east side of the canal, the neighborhood has middle-class apartment flats, demonstrating the transition from Park Slope to Gowanus, from the affluent working to the working-class industrial. This playground was across from the apartment flats from the previous slide. In the background, we see the Stone House. Located in Washington Park on the border of Park Slope and Gowanus, the Old Stone House marks the place where the original Dutch farmstead stood and the culminating engagement of the 1776 Battle of Brooklyn took place.
And more trivia. The Old Stone House was the original clubhouse of the team that became the Brooklyn Dodgers. The Old Stone House is now on the National Register of Historic Places. So from the Old Stone House, it's a short walk to the Gowanus Canal. A lot of history there. On two of our trips, we approached each of these neighborhoods, the Gowanus neighborhood and Carroll Gardens, from different directions. And let me just show you a few pics of Carroll Gardens. On the west side of the canal, it's distinguished by its large front yards with lovely gardens. And here's another large front yard. Not so much a lovely garden, but you'll see the trash cans because New York City, unlike Chicago, does not have alleys. And so all the trash cans are stored right there in the spacious front yards. Gowanus Canal. This is originally a creek, Gowanus Creek, and in the 1860s, it was straightened and dredged to allow shipping. The shipping in turn led to the desirability of the neighborhood as a manufacturing and warehouse neighborhood. And that led to industrial waste being dumped into the canal, which makes right now the canal a Superfund site. I want to talk about two canal crossings. There's the Carroll Street Bridge and the Smith 9th Street Bridge. Here's the Carroll Street. Now this connects the two neighborhoods. It's a low level river crossing, but the design of this bridge is unique. It's a retractable bridge. And I'll explain that in a minute. There's only two of those in the city. It's currently undergoing rehab and due to reopen in 2026. This photograph is circa 1955. You can see the Canal Street Bridge circled over there. Of note is the industrial landscape on the east side, and contrast that with the residential buildup on the Carroll Garden side. Here's a current day photograph, aerial photograph of the bridge. Now you can see how it retracts. This trapezoid shaped piece of roadway is the bridge, and when it needs to close, it will ride along this rail and butt up then against the end of the roadway right here. And also note on the northeast and northwest corners, you can see some of this construction going on. The whole length of the canal has been lately the site of all kinds of new residential construction. So gentrification in progress. Now, a little further south is the 9th Street Bridge. Now, there's really two bridges here. Here's the original, the old bridge, still in current use. There's the blue structure here is the roadway, and these two large vertical columns, it's a vertical lift bridge. So the roadway will lift up, allowing ship traffic to pass through. However, in 1925, when the subway was being constructed, they originally wanted to tunnel under the canal, but that proved to be too expensive. So they decided to build a elevated portion of the train over that existing bridge. And what we have here is the station, the Smith 9th Street station on top of that bridge. It's the highest station in the system, almost 90 feet high, opened back in 1933. There is 4 tracks carrying both the F and the G trains. And after an extensive renovation in 2013, they added escalators. I'm happy to say that these escalators work. Up on the platform level of the station, you can look south and see a view of the Gowanus Canal today, showing remnants of the industrial activity. And if you turn around, you can see the gorgeous view of Lower Manhattan as you wait for the incoming F train.
Okay, now our next visit was to Bushwick. We're big fans of murals and we seek them out in every city that we visited. We had read about the Artist Cooperative in Bushwick, whose members had painted murals on numerous storefronts and warehouses. So off we went to Bushwick to see the murals within a multi-block area. There are many striking murals. This one celebrates Brooklyn and requires a bi-directional photo to get the full picture. Here's some aliens, I guess. I don't know what they were, but they're quite colorful. And this beautiful little girl, obviously she's singing to the music that's behind her. Now, this is very interesting. Okay, we saw this woman walking with flowers, and Rich asked her if he could take her picture. Once we put this photo into the slideshow, she became one with the mural. But she is real. So here's some amusing characters. Maybe they're muralists in caricature. Now, this section of the block is opened to new artists, and on a weekly basis, this rectangle is reworked by budding muralists. Here's some shots of the Brooklyn neighborhood. The Bushwick neighborhood. This neighborhood is a little more working class than some of the neighborhoods we've seen before. Here's a few shots. Here's some of the more of the residences. And, you know, it became time for a phone charge, so why not have a slice on the side?
Still in Bushwick, we walked along Wyckoff Avenue toward the Myrtle Avenue and the old L, where we were going to get the train back. Under the L, we found a farmer's market and some other vendors, including this lady selling jewelry. And Maria scored a pair of earrings for about $5 here.
Okay, so right now there's a renaissance going on the East River. Brooklyn and Queens sides of the East River, they were highly industrialized, like Gowanus was, and then that was until about the 2000s. Now, Long Island City, Greenpoint, Williamsburg, Red Hook, on the East River, across from Manhattan, have become trendy neighborhoods for the upwardly mobile. They were creating a new demand for ferry service and to and from Manhattan. We enjoyed several ferry rides, but ferries are not new. Remember Robert Fulton from the 1814s.
So on the left, here's a picture of the Union Ferry Company's ferry boat on the Fulton River, on the Fulton Ferry route about 1900. But with the opening of the Brooklyn, Williamsburg, and Manhattan bridges, ferry service started to decline. And when the subway opened in 1903, connecting Brooklyn to Manhattan, that was kind of the final straw. Ferry service just disappeared, no demand. But since 2000, as these waterfront areas were being transformed from maritime industries to residential spaces, the growing population demanded alternative transportation methods. And so ferry service started to reappear. Okay, so here's a map. This is the current NYC ferry system. And it provides affordable transportation between waterfront communities up and down the East River, Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. There is 6 routes here spanning about 60 miles of waterway. The second map shows a close-up of many of the ferry stops along the Brooklyn and Lower Manhattan waterfront. Now, one of the stops on that ferry is Williamsburg. This is a scene in the 1940s along the Williamsburg waterfront. This is the old Domino sugar refinery. Recently, the building was transformed into this unique development of new retail and residential space. The exterior facade has landmark status and was retained, while the interior of the building was gutted and replaced with a new structure. And right adjacent to that new structure is the former waterfront dock and warehouse property of Domino Sugar. That's been rehabbed into a park. Domino Park uses remnants from the industrial era as sculptural elements.
Well, our next visit was to Red Hook. Actually, in 2023, Red Hook was one of our first visits and the very first visit rides into Brooklyn. Red Hook was considered a rough neighborhood. It was once the home of shipping yards and longshoremen, and it's the last holdout for low rent. Red Hook is still rough around the edges, but it's ready for gentrification, so you should get there before the cobblestone charm is gone. We got off the ferry at Red Hook, the Red Hook stop. 2 blocks from the dock, we ran into this sign. In 2012, Hurricane Sandy hit New York City hard, and several communities, including Red Hook, were inundated. Here you can see the watermark was even taller than me. Just recently, the city has broken ground on the Red Hook Coastal Resiliency Project, a $218 million initiative to bolster the flood protection infrastructure of Red Hook. A gentrification is inevitable. On the left, we see a newly rehabbed building with a design studio, and on the right, an old hardware store that still hangs on. And here we came across a warehouse conversion into a whiskey distillery. Red Hook whiskey, anyone?
On another visit to Brooklyn, we caught a ferry from the foot of Wall Street in Manhattan to the Brooklyn Navy Yard. En route, the ferry passes under the Brooklyn and Manhattan bridges, and you arrive at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And as you pull into the dock, you can see you're greeted with these remnants of its shipbuilding heyday. The yard has been decommissioned since 1966, and these unused cranes have been a rusting reminder of its past. Lately, however, the yard has been resurrected as an area of private manufacturing and light industry. WeWork is a major tenant in this new building, and today the yard is an area of private manufacturing and commercial activity with over 200 tenants. But let's take a minute and look at the history of the yard. Here's another old map. This one showing Wallabout Bay, site of the future Navy Yard. After the American Revolution, merchant vessels were built here. And in 1801, the Navy purchased 40 acres of land and established the official New York Naval Shipyard. In its heyday, just before World War II, the site included 4 dry docks, 2 steel shipways, barracks, power plant, machine shops, and a federal-style commandant's house, expanded to over 200 acres over the years. And here's a 1960s era topo map showing the extent of that as it existed back then. There we go. Now, many notable ships were built at the Navy Yard, such as the Maine, the U.S. Arizona, and the U.S. Missouri. Here's the Arizona leaving the Navy Yard, which is just on the other side of the Brooklyn Bridge. The Arizona commissioned in 1913 met its fate, of course, at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. Also built here were the USS Maine, another battleship that you may remember the slogan, "Remember the Maine," which was the rally cry that sparked the Spanish-American War. And the U.S. Missouri, completed in 1944, this ship saw some action in the South Pacific and was notably the ship on which the Japanese surrendered.
Building 92, built in 1857, that's the red brick building that it was the former commandant's house. A new 4-story modern addition is behind it. It provides exhibits, public tours, educational programs, archival resources, and workforce development services. The mission of the Brooklyn Navy Yard Center at Building 92 is to celebrate the Navy Yard's past, present, and future. Upon leaving the Brooklyn Navy Yard, as soon as you walk through the gates, you're in for the Fort Greene neighborhood. Fort Greene is named after an American Revolutionary War era fort that was built in 1776 under the supervision of General Nathanael Greene. It's known for its elegant, low-rise houses and Brooklyn Tech High School, where Rich's father attended, and that was the main reason why we were going to Fort Greene in the first place. However, we knew nothing about Fort Greene Park. until we got there and found the martyrs' monument and crypt. During the Revolutionary War, the British set up a system of prison ships anchored in Wallabout Bay. More than 11,000 Patriot soldiers and civilians, captives, died there and were thrown overboard. And when the Brooklyn Navy Yard was being built, Wallabout Bay was dredged up for shipbuilding. Bones of the thousands were discovered, and the crypt for the bones of the Patriots was established. Olmsted and Vaux designed this park too in 1864. As we continued to walk through Fort Greene, we ran across an unexpected find. Spike Lee's studio, 40 acres and a mule, referring to the Civil War era promise made to former enslaved African Americans to give them plots of land and a mule to work it. Now, if you know anything about Spike Lee's films, you know that he has a long love affair with Brooklyn. But Fort Greene has an artsy past too. Walt Whitman lived there in 1850, and when he sold his land to self-publish The Leaves of Grass. Fort Greene was a largely African-American neighborhood in the 20th century. It's changed over the years, with the Black population decreasing from 41% in 2000 to 25% in 2017. Here's a farmer's market that we came across that with an interesting contrast of some seasonal produce. Now we're really getting off the beaten path to the farthest south and east neighborhoods of Brooklyn. On the Queens border, that's where you'll find East New York and City Line. Our mission was to visit the quirky Seltzer Museum and some jewels in the rough.
The Brooklyn Seltzer Museum, but not just a museum. It's a fully functioning seltzer bottling plant. The equipment there is owned and lovingly maintained by the Gomberg family. Seltzer originated in Germany, and its name comes from the German town, Seltzer. It became a necessity and a cultural icon in New York City, particularly in Jewish communities in the late 19th and early 20th century. Seltzer was once called the Jewish champagne and was widely available via home delivery, cementing its status as a symbol of New York's unique history and vibrant immigrant culture. The Seltzer Men, here it is. They were staples of the community, driving their trucks full of seltzer bottles for home delivery. Seltzer and soda delivery were a thing when we were growing up, and I do remember watching these trucks go up and down the block on a weekly basis, delivering soda and seltzer. Now you can buy imported sparkling water from France, Italy, and other places, or make it at home, but it's not the same as a real spritz.
The bottles are also cared for. They are antiques. They were originally from Europe, mostly Czechoslovakia.
Egg cream, anyone? Ever hear of an egg cream? There's no egg or cream in it. It's got to be Fox's You Bet chocolate syrup, 4 ounces of whole milk, and a spritz. Now, full disclosure, when I was 16, I spent the summer working in a local candy store as a soda jerk. I made my share of egg creams, and here's how it's done.
Squirt the seltzer in, and what we're doing is we're churning the milk. It's not disrupting the syrup, so you're going to get a white foam. So we have a white foam. Then, when we mix the chocolate in, it mixes with the liquid. It does not mix with the foam. So you get a chocolate drink with a white head. That is an egg. Wow. Who's first?
Yeah, well, I was first.
Yeah. And Mel Brooks, another Brooklynite, he says you have to use You Bet syrup. And there's a testament to that in this artifact letter from Mel Brooks at the museum. Ah, the old neighborhood. From the Seltzer Museum at 478 Hemlock Street, we walked through this neighborhood that looked more and more familiar with every step. My father's family home was at 488 Pine Street, just around the corner from the Seltzer Museum. Pictured here, this two-story, two-family brick attached house was typical of the area. It looks about the same except for the front yard and the chain link fence. Nowadays, the residents of my father's neighborhood are mostly from Bangladesh. It's the story of New York City, an always evolving home for newly arriving immigrants. Our family friends had a grocery store on the corner of Pitkin Avenue and Crescent Street. The black and white photo in the corner shows our friend's family in front of that store. This is the same corner, but boy, it looks quite different. Here's some more street views just to give you an idea of the East New York City line neighborhood. And as the name implies, City Line is situated on the border of Brooklyn, adjacent to Queens. The Lindenwood Diner is on the main road, Lindenwood Boulevard. It's on the edge of Brooklyn, and if you will, it's edgy in more ways than one. The Lindenwood Diner played host to the surveillance of the Gotti mob. Many late nights were spent there in our teens, and the food is pretty good. Down the road from the diner is Sapphire Street. The neighborhood remained an outpost within the city. The neighborhood is referred to as the Jewels for the street names, including Amber, Emerald, and Sapphire. Some call it the Hole because it's 30 feet below street level. And as you can see, some of the roads are partly unpaved, and the sewer city system does not extend to this corner of Brooklyn. It's prone to flooding. Now the city has plans to develop this last bit of land, but since it's near a remaining wetlands, there's a chance that there'll be that environmental considerations will prevail. There was a time from the 1930s until the 1980s when my grandparents operated a small farm in this neighborhood. They cultivated vegetables and raised chickens and rabbits, selling their products to local acquaintances. I was a farm girl in my early childhood days when this outpost was a rustic area. Another outpost, Coney Island. It's the closest beach to Manhattan on the Atlantic Ocean, but it's difficult to reach in the early days. The name Coney is thought to come from the Dutch word for rabbit, conine. It was the first American amusement park. The steeplechase opened in 1897 with a wild ride. In 1919, the subway arrived on Stillwell Avenue, opening Coney Island to the masses. In 1927, the Cyclone roller coaster opened. It's still in operation today. In 1927, the Riggleman Boardwalk was also completed. It was the most important public works project in Brooklyn since the Brooklyn Bridge. The boardwalk connects several amusement areas and attractions on Coney, including the recent addition of the New York Aquarium and the Coney Island Museum. The New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission designated the Riggleman Boardwalk as a scenic landmark in 2018. Coney's known for its iconic rides, and the parachute jump is the only remaining portion of the Steeplechase Park. It's a New York City designated landmark and has been listed on the National Register of Historic Places, along with the Wonder Wheel and the Cyclone, which is still in operation. The magnificent frame of the parachute jump still stands as an iconic symbol of Coney's glory.
Here's another iconic landmark, Nathan's Coney Island, home of the Nathan's hot dogs. It's not on the National Register of Historic Places, but it's certainly embedded in American culture. We had to stop and have one during our September 24 visit. Full confession, I'll take a classic Chicago dog over a Nathan's dog any day. Another iconic ride, this is the New York City subway to Coney Island. This is the Stillwell Avenue station, known as the Coney Island Terminal, because it's the end of 4 different lines through Brooklyn serving Coney Island. It's one of the largest elevated transportation terminals in the world. There was a major renovation done about 20 years ago. And there's more to Coney Island, though, than the amusement park and the beach. Coney Island's distance from Manhattan results in longer commutes and historically lower housing costs. However, with limited housing availability in New York, the increase in remote work, Coney Island has seen rising demand and higher housing prices. In recent decades, it's developed into a densely populated area featuring high-rise buildings along Surf Avenue.
Well, Coney Island, it's the end of the line for the subway, and it's the conclusion for our journey.
Brooklyn is where it's at, always welcoming, ever evolving, and forever influencing American culture. Our visits to Brooklyn took us through a variety of neighborhoods throughout the county, some off the beaten path, some well known. Here's the locations we visited. Where will you go?
Well, we hope you enjoyed the journey and that it's given you a feel for this vibrant, multifaceted city that we've grown to love. There's more to discover, and we're going back. We'd like to thank the GSC for hosting this presentation and for the relatives and friends who hosted us during our visit to Brooklyn. We'd especially like to thank you for joining us today. Now, if we have time for any questions.
Okay, what do we do?
No.
Thank you,
Joe,
guys.
do you have?
Yes, that was a great presentation. We did get a
Yes.
few questions here. Let's see. First one is, who is replacing the African American population in Fort Greene?
Oh, well, it's a combination of diverse folks, but mostly white young professionals are moving into and they're gentrifying that area.
So yuppies, pretty much.
To use the old term, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I think that was the only one we had about the presentation. Someone asked when this will be available as a recording. We'll have it on the website under the event shortly. We had a bunch of people saying thank you and that they very much enjoyed the presentation. So kudos to you guys.
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you everyone who joined the presentation today.
Thank you. And we do just have a few quick announcements here. I'll keep my eye on the questions in case any more come in, but I'll just go over our upcoming events real quickly here. Let's see.
Joe, would you like us to stop sharing our screen?
Yeah, if you don't mind, that would be great. Thank you. So as you can see, we have our next event coming up. It's our Travelogue. It's going to be November 18th. This one is going to be on Krakow, Poland, presented by Jeff Clappies. He's a traveling librarian, so make sure to tune into that one. And the following day, we are going to have, excuse me, it's going to be our Urban Hiking and Nature Walks tour. That's going to be presented by Lindsay Welbers. And November 19th is actually National GIS Day, so be sure to tune in with us as a way to celebrate. That's all we have for now. So thank you again, everyone, for attending. I don't think we had, oh, we did get one more question, Rich and Maria, so I'll turn that over to you guys real quick. Are there any other places in Brooklyn that we could visit, but that you didn't include in your presentation?
God.
Well,
Yeah,
let's see.
There's one or two maybe. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, nothing really comes to mind off the top of our heads, but Brooklyn is a big borough, and as you saw in that slide that we had, we only touched,
a few places.
A few places.
You go there, meander on your own, take the train, take the ferries, and just investigate.
Yeah, you know what? Now I think about it, near the downtown Brooklyn area is the Barclays Center, which you may have heard of. That's a place where the New York Nets play, right? And there's a lot of events that happen there. So that whole area we didn't really explore, but there's a lot going on down there. There's another music venues. The old Paramount is now another music venue. So, yep.
Yeah, it looks like we did get one more just general question. Where did you Where did you stay when you were there?
Ah, interesting. This is, we stayed in, first of all, some friends of ours hosted us up in Manhattan, and we took the train in most times. But we also used to stay in Long Island City, which in a place called Dutch Kills, and if you're wondering if the Dutch had any influence on New York. And there was a Best Western hotel there that we stayed at a few times.
And that's just one short ferry ride or one short train ride to get you into Brooklyn.
Yeah. So what's interesting about Brooklyn is because most of the, you know, Brooklyn is hard to traverse by train. So you almost have to go back into Manhattan to get back into different neighborhoods in Brooklyn rather than going across from one spot to another if you want to take it public transportation. If you have a car, it's a whole other story. It's a lot easier to get around.
Yes. Okay, I think that was everything we had. I have a question as someone who lives in this city. Does Brooklyn compare to any neighborhoods or north side or south side that we have here? Would you say, or is it just too different to even match up?
Yeah, I think our neighborhood, we live near Wrigley Field. I always thought our neighborhood reminded me a lot of Park Slope, actually. Yeah, it does. Just not the architecture. Yeah, the architecture. Instead of brownstones, though, we have gray stones, right?
Yeah.
Other neighborhoods, I don't know. Yeah, the industrial neighborhoods that you might see if you were driving on the Stevenson going towards Midway Airport, you see a lot of the industrial stuff. There's still remnants of that in Brooklyn.
All right, I think that was all our questions. So, yeah, thank you again so much, you guys, and
Right.
thank you everyone for tuning in. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.